First of all, I would like to thank you for participating in this system mapping for degrowth workshop. I hope you will enjoy it. This is a short presentation on what system mapping is and what I hope to do in this short period of time. So what is participatory system mapping? Let's start with the term system. The system in this sense is a combination of parts or elements that make up a coherent entity. So basically, we're trying to find the elements of what makes up a proper degrowth world. Mapping in this sense is creating a map of a phenomenon, but what we have to take into account is that it's always going to be a simplified reality. We are trying to uncover the structure together with the obvious and hidden relationships, but it's never going to be like reality. It's just going to be a mental construction of what we think reality is, and it's always going to be simplified. What is a system map? A system map is a conceptual model of the variables or elements of a complex issue or a problem. And why is it participatory? Because I believe we have to share our knowledge and we have to have a certain type of common understanding of this issue. So I hope that what we gain at the end is a mental construction of our understanding of what influences degrowth as a whole. So let's have a look at a simple example. The weight I gain or lose depends on how much I eat and especially how much chocolate I eat. It also depends on how much sports I can do. So the food intake I have, the more food I have, the more weight I will gain. So this is a positive relationship. While the more physical activity I have, the less I gain weight, which means it has a negative relationship. So these two things influence my weight differently from a different direction. So let's have a look at a few feedback loops. We have a stressful feedback loop regarding my weight. If we gain more weight, we might get a bit more stressed or get frustrated. But the more frustrated we get, the more chocolate we eat. And the more chocolate we eat, the more weight we gain. So this is a positive feedback loop. It's a stressful feedback loop. On the other hand, regarding this topic, we have a different feedback loop as well. We have a sportive feedback loop. So if we have less weight, we have more emotional support because people tell us how good we look. Then, because of this emotional support, we are planning to do even more physical activity that leads us to even less weight. So this is another feedback loop. And now let's have a look at how we intervene in this system. And this is especially important to us because this is the whole purpose of doing this. We want to know, for example, in our own case, what strategies, what policies we have to follow in order to move towards a degrowth world. So intervention in the system is very important. And in this particular example, we can intervene by campaigning on healthy diets. We can intervene by providing expert advice on healthy diets. And we can also influence the system by trying to move towards values that will influence this system. For example, instead of being frustrated or stressed because we gained weight, we can just try and have more quiet, have more calmness in our life so these things don't affect us. Or, for example, with this whole loop of emotional support because I weigh less, it might just be nonsense. So maybe we can have a value that gives absolutely no importance to looks. And in that case, our whole system is going to change as well. This one was a pretty simple case of system mapping, but I wanted to show you a bit more complex case of system mapping. And this was a case where they wanted to map how stability can be achieved in Afghanistan. And as you can see, this is pretty complex. This is why General Stanley McChrystal actually said, when we understand that slide, we'll have won the war. So this is pretty complex. It looks a bit complicated, but on the other hand, it gives us a lot of insight on what influences the whole stability, for example, in a country. So this is quite similar to what we want to achieve in terms of degrowth. But of course, today we will not have enough time to come up with such a complex system map. So how do we create such a system map? First of all, we agree on the variables we want to use in the system. All the variables that influence our purpose, our state. Then we want to see what the causal relationships are between these variables. This is actually what we're going to do today. Try and see what influences degrowth and how they affect each other. And then, of course, today we will not have time for this, but we're going to have we have we can have a look at where delayed effects may occur that influence the whole system, and of course what feedback loops there might be. So here's another example to understand what we're going to do. We have to work with variables in this simple system map. The variables are like volume of cars, traffic, delay, productivity, income. Variables are factors that help us understand a particular problem. They are at least ordinal, meaning they can move up or down. This means that we often use terms like degree, level, number, price, speed, etc. But in our case with degrowth, we're not going to put all this there today. They are going to be variables that can move up or down, but we're not going to say level of social trust because that just makes things a bit more complicated. So we just say social trust, for example. But what we need is to see whether the relationships we're going to draw are negative or positive. Negative relationship is, for example, a demand for public transport and the volume of cars. Of course, the more the demand for the public transport, the less cars are on the road. So this is a negative relationship. It's an invert relationship because X and Y, they move in the opposite direction. If one increases, the other decreases. Let's have a look at a positive relationship. A positive relationship is to do with traffic. The more cars we have on the roads, the more traffic we have. So in this case, X and Y move in the same directions. We can have a look at the feedback loops as well. One is a self-regulating feedback loop, and the other one is a self-amplifying feedback loop. But this time, we're not going to identify the feedback loops in our systems. So I'm not going to talk more about this. If you want, you can always have a look at this slide later on. So how have I come up with the variables that we're going to use in this exercise, in this workshop? This is, of course, not without precedent. In Hungary, there has been 7 different, partly degrowth-oriented participatory research that are relevant to today's workshop. And the topics of these were sustainable employment, sustainable business, sustainable marketing, sustainable sports, sustainable consumption, sustainable cosmolocal manufacturing, and economic higher education. These were all policy and action-oriented research, and the system maps showed how the recommended intervention steps interact with each other. So basically, these were the system maps where I had a look at those variables that I found most important in degrowth. So here's the system map for sustainable employment. Here's the system map for sustainable business. And here's the system map for sustainable consumption. These are just an overview of what they look like. And if you want, you can always go back, stop the presentation and have a look at them. So now I'm going to provide you with some rules for this workshop. One, I would like to amplify again that this model that we're going to develop is a simplified mapping of reality and the result of our current understanding. So, of course, we all know that life is a bit more complex than that, but now we have 90 minutes to come up with this system mapping. And synthesis is the art of skipping things. We might be skipping things. I'm actually certain that we're going to skip a lot of things, but it's worth focusing on the system itself instead of gathering too many variables. Of course, if you think there's a variable that's missing or there's a link that's really missing, we should add that to our map. And hopefully everyone will have the chance to comment. But I would like to ask everyone to refrain from long monologues and strive to create an exciting atmosphere. So what is going to be our workshop process? Due to the lack of time, I have identified 30 variables that I found important to degrowth, and we work with these variables. And then, as a group, we identify the causal relationships between these variables. If we seriously miss a variable, we can always add it. I am going to share my screen, and at the same time, I'm going to draw the system map during our conversation. However, I have done such an exercise before, but I have never ever done it online. And I can only hope this will work. But I'm relying on your support and on your understanding if it proves to be a bit more difficult online than what I thought might be the case. We're not going to go through the 30 proposed variables of a degrowth system because I'm going to show them to you in person and not in this presentation. So again, thank you for participating and hope that you will enjoy this workshop.